welcome back to the Infinity Investment Strategies Member of the Month. This is our time where we get to turn the spotlight from our business to the business of our clients. My name is Erica Neal. I am your wealth strategist, your infinite banking practitioner, and today I have a super exciting interview with DJ McClure with National Flood Experts. So as you guys know, we are going to do a deep dive into DJ's business, figure out where he comes from, how he's grown his business, the things that he's done and the skills that he's acquired to become so successful, while also demonstrating how he provides values to business owners and real estate investors and how he can potentially help you. DJ, thank you so much for coming on. I'm excited to have you with us.
Absolutely. Yeah, this has been a lot of anticipation building up to our date today.
I know thank you for being flexible. I know we've had to change a little bit, but I am glad that you're on. And I remember when I first heard about your business, I didn't even know that this was possible. So I'm sure there's so many other of my clients and so many other viewers that are going to feel the same way. And I'm in the insurance world. You're in that similar space. Insurance isn't always fun to talk about, but when it comes to flood insurance, that can be a huge pain, a big expense, and sometimes it's mandated. So we're going to dive in today on the flood insurance side and how you can help people that are dealing with that either minimize it or eradicate it completely. So stay tuned. We'll get into that a little bit further. But before we do that, DJ, tell us about you, your background. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? How did you get from where you were to where you are now?
Yeah, I'm from Western Kentucky originally, a small town called Owensboro that probably most haven't heard of. Um, and so, interestingly, I grew up playing sports, played a lot of tennis as a kid, and then, tennis kind of became my main sport. Played college tennis, and then started, kind of a career in the tennis coaching, tennis pro world.
Oh, I didn't
For
know
most of
that.
most of my 20s was lived on a tennis court. So I like to say that tennis was my, foundational sales and business training.
Yeah. How do you feel about
Um,
pickleball?
not a fan.
Yeah. I figure being a tennis person, I know not a lot of people are. So sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, it's a good question. I think tennis people, at least guys that played, competitively, are kind of 50-50,
Yeah.
um, at least that I've found. So I don't know. I don't particularly enjoy it myself, but
Yeah. It's
um,
probably
no,
not near as much of a challenge as tennis because I play pickleball. I enjoy it as a very leisurely thing. But even when I play that, I can't imagine playing like actual scale tennis. So I have a much higher respect for tennis players now. But anyway, sorry to distract you.
no worries. Yeah, so tennis was interesting. I like to say it took me all over the world. Like I went to South America, lived in Puerto Rico, so lived various places while I was, still kind of in the tennis industry.
Fun.
Um, but as I was kind of leaving that world, I was wanting to get into more of a, professional sales type role and was checking out a few different industries. And so I met this company, National Flood Experts, being 7 years ago now. Tried to do a stint in the medical device world, decided it wasn't for me, and not being particularly happy with that, that situation. I was kind of looking around,
Yeah.
having been in Tampa now for 8, 9 years. Um, and so this company had a really particularly interesting niche that they were, really building out, consulting to the real estate world. So very non-linear, I guess, to what's led me here.
Yeah, but I think, you kind of mentioned it that working in the professional sports world probably has some overlap that you were able to get some skills that transferred over to, what you do now. So, I mean, you're coaching people still technically, but just in a different industry.
Yeah, the first sales job I ever had an interview, he asked me, he said, "So what's your understanding of the sales process?" And I said, "Well, I said, it's a lot like a tennis lesson." I was like, you meet somebody, you got to build trust and build rapport quickly. I was like, figure out what their problem is and then quickly implement a solution. And he looked at me and goes, "Yeah, I think you understand. It's kind of
You
the
got
same."
it. And when I worked originally I got hired by a big box firm like right out of college in the investment world. And the manager that hired me, she was great. And she had the team that I was on was a high performing team, which is great. I was surrounded by great people. But she told me, she goes, I look for two things whenever I'm recruiting and hiring. She goes, I look for people who are either um, athletes all through high school and college and or they work while they were in school and they're able to use those. So it doesn't necessarily translate over to investments, but there's skills and work ethic that you develop that translate very well. So sounds like it's worked out really well for you. That's awesome. And so you're based in Tampa now,
Mhm.
married to a lovely wife. And so were you interested in real estate when you got into National Flood Experts, or did you get introduced to real estate through that space?
A little bit of both. I think that's what really caught my interest, when I was first saw the job post was, kind of working in parallel to to the real estate industry. I'd had a lot of tennis clients, had been successful, as real estate investors. And so having had exposure and just kind of having a basic idea of that industry as a whole, I think it was a client base that I felt that I could really be successful with
Yeah.
and relatable. I'd had some, single family that I'd owned and rented to that point, but nothing to any kind of scale. But, doing projects primarily with the multifamily, client base for the last 7 years, it's like this magnet that just kind of pulls you in. Unfortunately, it pulled me in at 2021 and 22. Um, so it's been a nice education in the last few years into um, all the things you can imagine.
All the
But
things that can go wrong.
but if
Yeah.
I can manage to survive this valley that we're in right
Yeah.
now and have any money left after, then it'll make for an interesting next set of investments.
Yeah, it's kind of baptism by fire. I know what you mean. I was kind of in it a little bit beforehand, but I think my husband and I both went as heavy as we had before in like 21, 22. So yeah, we're gonna kind of get out and get as much of our lunch from it as we can and just move on. So
Right.
is what it is. But so you're doing multifamily investments now. So you are a passive investor while you continue to grow your business.
Mhm.
Um, with that, so I know you're based in Tampa, Florida. What markets do you primarily serve, and what is the scope that you can serve if it makes sense?
Talking about national flood experts.
Yes.
So we're based out of Tampa, but we have engineers in house that are licensed nationwide. So our projects really aren't limited to any geography, and we tend to work with pretty much every asset class on the commercial side. So multifamily is about 50% of our projects every year, but we do self-storage, industrial, retail, condo, all the things you can imagine. Um, the solutions that we provide, they apply equally really across any type of real estate.
Perfect. That was going to be one of my questions is obviously you do the multifamily, but like you mentioned, you can do all asset classes. Um, and does that include new development or are they structures that already have to be in place?
It's everything that you can imagine. So we're working a lot these days with ground up construction developers quite a bit. There's really different problems that you encounter at different stages of the real estate life cycle. And so just to give kind of like a brief overview, so our goal is to be able to reduce or eliminate the flood insurance cost for the investor. So there's different things we can do to change the flood zones. There's different things we can do to reduce their flood insurance policies, and all the solutions are engineering based. Um, so you might see particular issues that a developer runs into that are perhaps required by the municipality. You may see things as someone's looking to refinance, and some of their coverage requirements through like Fannie Mae might be changing. And
Mm,
so our team, having a really strong baseline in understanding the full real estate cycle really allows us to be malleable to some of the different problems that they face that the flood zones are creating, and then walking our clients through, how these solutions can help.
Can we, yeah, I think that's a good point because I didn't even think about when you're refinancing, which a lot of people are doing and they're looking to do, especially over the next probably 6 to 9 months, and we'll see what interest rates do. But I think people are optimistic. So when people are refining, I guess let's start there. The loan terms can change. Fannie and Freddie might adjust what their requirements are for the
Mhm.
flood. What are some things that you've seen happen that you've been able to step in and help operators of any commercial asset class? They, when they're going through the refinance, if the lender is saying, hey, now you need to carry flood insurance or even increase it, what have you seen happen and how can you step in and help the refi side?
Yeah, so these types of loan programs, they have specific requirements for the replacement cost value. So the coverage limits increase in most cases dramatically from what they may have had with their initial short-term lender. Those programs also require business interruption insurance, so
Okay.
that can be extremely costly when you put those two together. Those are generally requirements they didn't have with that first loan cycle. So you could see someone go from spending 10, 20, 30,000 to spending well over 1 to 200,000 in some cases. So thing about the flood zones is that any 100-year flood zone, the lenders have a federal compliance they have to pass on that dictates those flood insurance, limit requirements. But if we're able to get a property taken out of the 100-year flood zone, it removes those requirements. So that can be a dramatic difference. Um, and in particular, right now, we have a lot of properties, like you said, that are looking to refi. So they're doing everything on possible on paper to get their values up as much as possible,
Yeah,
especially if they can just try to get to where it's a neutral refinance or some positive, right?
right.
But we've had several successful cases recently where, we've added five, 600,000 or more in value to the property entering the refinance. So it
Wow.
can be pretty dramatic.
That's a huge increase on just by readjusting the flood zone, removing them from a flood zone and being able to reduce what they have to carry as far as insurance. So as most people in the commercial space know, if you're going to increase your NOI, you can either increase your rents or decrease expenses. So you're coming at it from the decreased expense side, which, to be honest, I think most people are starting to realize, especially in Texas, there's only so much you can increase rents. There's only so much other income you can generate. The area that you have most control over as an operator is asset management and making sure that you minimize expenses as much as possible. So you can come in and help them do that. So if somebody is looking to do a refinance and they're planning on that coming down the pipeline, let's say 6 to 9 months from now, when should they be contacting you? What's the best point for you to get involved in a refi?
I mean, really as early as possible. For
Okay.
anyone that has a flood insurance requirement, I'd encourage them to reach out as soon as they can. Because the thing about it is like there could be refunds or there could be credits we're able to recoup on the current policies.
Oh, okay.
Um, there could be a renewal coming up that they're going to run into before they'd even get to the refinance. Any number of things. And it's one of those things too, like if you hear this podcast and this is catching your ear, it's like if you don't act on it now, you know as well as I do that in 30 minutes something else is going to be on fire that you have to go chase. So the review that our team does doesn't cost anything. So
Okay.
there's really no downside, to having our team take a look. And then if there's more to talk about, we keep going down the rabbit hole. Um, but most of the solutions that we're doing take about 6 to 8 weeks, to get start to finish. So obviously, the more time that you have is always a good thing.
So even if you have a policy in place, you have a current flood policy in place, there, what you're saying is there are potential credits that you could go in for the policy you have and lower that premium moving forward. If, I mean, you might even be able to eliminate the need for that, but worst case scenario, at least get your flood insurance premium lowered.
Correct.
That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
So the flood zone obviously can't be changed everywhere, right? So that's where when we can't there, we dig into the policies to see if there's anything that can be,
Mm.
improved in the rating. So we demonstrate to the carrier There's rating characteristics that are, you know, more positive or stronger perhaps than they were, using initially. And then we, in that case, reduce the premium cost, and then the client sees a year-over-year impact subsequently.
I didn't realize that. So even if you're not able to get them out of the flood zone, you can at least help them with their current policy.
Correct. Yeah, so we had a client last year, their flood map had changed and they had a new requirement, and the whole property had to buy flood insurance to the token of
Mm.
about 250,000, pretty high cost.
Golly.
We were able to take them down to about 200.
Nice.
Now, just to clarify, like, we're not insurance brokers, so we're not writing someone's policies. We're just consulting on it. So we work adjacent to anyone's insurance broker. That's a pretty common question. So we're not asking you to move your business. We work in parallel to, tons and tons of insurance brokers around the country, and this is like an extended resource for them. And so in that case, they were able to get the policy updated about a month before the renewal. So they got credits back for that expiring year. Then it recalculated their actual renewal invoice. So that's quite a bit of money that they had, to the notion of about 100,000 um, in savings, if you will, that were created pretty instantly. And then they see that 50,000 year over year, as a residual savings.
That's huge. Especially because, like you said, if you guys aren't brokers, a lot of people feel like you're just trying to, nobody wants to be sold. Nobody wants to feel like they,
Mhm.
got, but you guys are able to work with their current broker to help them adjust their premium. So if they're, I think you said that other one, they went from paying 250 and you reduced it by 100,000.
By 50, but they got a $50,000 refund
Oh,
on their
nice.
expiring policy, and then they also saved 50, on the renewal. So you got money back, you got less money going out. So yeah, that was a pretty happy situation.
Yeah, $50,000 a year in savings on one property every single year. So that's just the gift that keeps on giving. That's fantastic. Okay. I did not realize you guys were working with the brokers as well. So on the refi, obviously that's a big deal. If you have flood insurance or that new requirement is coming down the pipeline, definitely y'all need to be having a conversation. You're giving free reviews. Um, do you know, or I don't know if this is a statistic you know offhand, not everybody can be changed. I mean, some people are legitimately in a flood zone.
Mhm.
If you were to look back over the last like 7 years, what percentage of people do you think you've been able to like actually have an impact on their bottom line, whether or not they've adjusted flood zones or not? Like what percentage of people from phone call to actually saving money do you see happen there?
It's right at 45%.
Nice. That's a big number.
So we watch that pretty closely, and we kind of do like a yearly average each year at our end of year, and then we aggregate over the past years, and it stays pretty consistent year over year, right within, kind of floats between 40 and 50 throughout the year. And so that's to say that almost half what we look at, we find something beneficial, to help the client.
I'm not surprised you know that statistic, by the way. I should have known. Yeah. DJ will know that. Oh, and I worked in P&C, so I did the personal lines like through college. And it was an independent firm, which was really nice because we could shop people's insurance like every 6 months, every year, or whatever. But even now as an adult, I make it a point, like we shop our insurance every year. And the people that I've talked to, if that's insurance, especially in Texas, and I know Florida's the same way, you guys get hit with insurance really hard there. You have to consistently look at that, consistently monitor it, consistently make adjustments. And that's the only way that you're not going to see these massive price increases, get the best deal. So like I said, I've only done it on the individual side. I haven't done it on the commercial side, but I would assume that regardless of how long you've had your policy, you need to be looking at it and seeing what adjustments can be made.
The flood insurance is interesting, right? Because there's FEMA's insurance program that probably, I don't know the exact statistic, but let's say about 70% of people have their flood policies through, the National Flood Insurance Program, or
Mm.
NFIP. And it's regulated. So with their policy, you don't have like the big swings up and down like you do with other insurance lines. They actually tell you what the maximum premium is going to be for their policy. And some people are still getting stair stepped up to that number. FEMA changed their system about 3 years ago. And so if you had a lower premium from the past and they think that your new max premium is higher, you're just gradually inching your way up. But once you hit that maximum premium number, you should stay pretty much the same every year. Now, if you have private flood insurance, because if you remember, pretty much all other insurance is private companies.
Right.
And they're, I mean, it's essentially an investment fund, right? So they're hedging how much premium do they take in versus how much claims are they going to pay out. And so they can, from one year to the next, choose to make your premium whatever they want.
Yeah.
Private flood insurance can be similar. They can choose not to renew you, obviously. They can choose to double your premium cost. You don't tend to see those massive jumps on the NFIP side. And
Okay.
that's why if we do make an improvement to the policy, that's why they see a consistent, residual impact.
That makes sense. Okay. That's really helpful though. So
Yeah,
let's
that's
talk about we just talked about the refi. I would assume that if somebody is moving into a new acquisition of a policy or of a policy, listen to me, of a property. So new acquisition of a property that's already built. If they're going into the due diligence period, and they've already had an offer submitted, what part of the new acquisition process should you come in? Is that still like that same, it's 6 to 8 week timeline that they need to be aware of?
Yeah, so as soon as someone gets under contract and they're right as they're entering due diligence, that's a great time to involve us. Um, that's when you can request documents from the seller. We can get a copy of their current flood policies.
Okay.
What's also unique about flood insurance is that you can assume ownership of NFIP's policies
Ooh.
from seller to buyer. So if they have a particular discount, like I was talking about before, like if they had a policy pre-2022 that still has a lower premium amount, um, and you assume ownership, you can maintain that same discount.
That would be huge. Instead of going into the new rate bracket, basically.
Yeah, so if you write a brand new policy, you start at FEMA's maximum premium price from day one.
Okay.
Sometimes it's not that much of a difference, but I've seen cases where it's 10 times higher than what the current premium is today. Not all insurance brokers, um, you know, I would say have that as a common practice, largely because, before 2022, insurance broker A and insurance broker B could both quote an NFIP policy and get the same number. Whereas, now if the seller has a policy in place at, let's say, 2,000 and the new insurance broker quotes it and it's at FEMA's max premium, let's say 5,000, it's going to be a pretty big jump from 2 to 5.
Yeah.
Whereas, like I said, before 2022, the seller's agent and the buyer's agent, you get the same number. So that particular strategy is more effective now, and not something that all buyers are aware of either.
Yeah. I think that'll be huge because we're in 2025 now. So anybody that bought a property in 2022 may not be, may or not be ready to sell. I know kind of depending on the property. But I think we're going to start to see a lot of 2020, 21 properties starting to come up. And so if you're looking at a property that the previous owner had it prior to 2022 and had flood insurance, you need to be having that conversation about assuming the NFIP. Is that something they can call you for, or is that something they just need to ask about?
Well, I would say it's, if there's flood policies, for sure have us take a look. And that's just
Okay.
one of the first things that we always check for because we know to look for that. And if it looks like there's a particular benefit, even if we can't help the client, if we see that the seller's policies have a discount, we're gonna recommend like, hey, you should consider talking to your agent to see if these policies make sense, to potentially take ownership. Um, and then if that's the case, they just make it part of the closing process.
Yeah.
But to your point about the timeline, so the earlier we're brought in due diligence, the more quickly we can evaluate if it looks like there's opportunities. And then in a lot of cases, we're engaged by these buyers to execute these solutions before closing even.
Yeah,
So if we can get the flood zone changed, they go into closing without a flood insurance requirement.
that's ideal.
Um, or in some cases also, if we find a way to reduce the seller's policies, we can put those discounts in place. They can assume ownership. Um, so it's just about trying to figure out, does it make sense to tackle this project prior to closing? Maybe it helps them negotiate a better loan proceed.
Mm,
Or they just don't want to have to buy flood insurance at all for closing. Maybe they choose to buy it after closing. There's all kinds of different situations that, somebody will discuss with their insurance broker, but we're just pointing out what the options are and what the data allows us to do. And then having a real estate conversation to say, all right, does this make sense? Do you do it now? Do you do it in 2 months?
yeah.
And then just go from there.
I mean, yeah, I agree. Like you said, doing it as early as possible to me makes the most sense. But depending on how many things you're juggling during your closing
Mhm.
process or how far you already are along. But regardless, so even if they close on a deal, they have flood insurance, it's after the fact. Hey, let's come back. And even though you've already had it, let's kind of revisit it. And once everything's stabilized, all right, let's see if we can, minimize your expense as much as possible moving forward.
Yeah, it's a pretty hands-off process for the owner. Once we get a few documents, we ask for like the insurance documents are in place for the flood. We try to get like some surveys, topography, elevation, certificate type documents. Um, and then once our review is done, if there's some next steps that are positive and the client signs a proposal, we handle everything. So we're operating in the background the whole time. That's why it's great because we're not adding any complication to the process.
Right.
We just need a couple conversations and a couple documents, and if there's something to move on, then we're handling it all pretty much more of a white glove style, delivery.
Yeah, because I mean, everybody, especially like we said, asset management, I think people have started to realize what an important part that is to real estate, and people are taking it much more serious, and it's a lot more, it's not as passive as it used to be. So people who are asset managers have their hands full and they don't want to add another thing to the plate. So you guys are coming in, white glove, handling it all. Um, and I want to come back. You mentioned like the filings and everything else with the municipalities. I'm thinking specifically of a new development. So if you have somebody coming in, and I know we were talking about another client of mine doing a development, um, if they have, be it, doesn't matter what type of development it is, if they're going into a new development project, at what point in the timeline should they be contacting you there? Because I know new development can take a couple of years to actually come to fruition. When should they be reaching out to you to start to analyze their flood situation?
Yeah, ideally before the plans have been sent for final approval,
Okay.
where there's still some small changes that can be made potentially. So we have a client that came to us a few weeks ago. We saw a solution. There were some minor adjustments that were needed on the site around the building. Nothing that was going to be super major, but they'd already had the plans approved. And so my initial response to the client was like, well, you probably at this stage, I'm guessing you don't want to go back and have to change your plans, resubmit for approval. But when we talked about the whole situation, what type of flood insurance requirement they were going to have ultimately in the type of debt they were going to put on the property post construction,
Mm,
because you tend to see, a construction loan, then you may see someone refinance into a more permanent debt structure, again, with different flood insurance requirements than what they had during the construction process. So in this case, they said, well, it would make sense. So they're actually working with their, site plan engineer to make some of the different tweaks that we recommended. And then we'll have a follow up. And at that point, we'll be getting the entire site out of the flood zone.
mm.
Um,
Wow, so the whole thing isn't they're not going to have any flood requirements at all.
correct.
Well, then,
The
yeah, it's
entire,
worth it. Oh my God.
but it's really about understanding what's being required by that local municipality, because some parts of Florida have some new requirements they're putting in place,
Mm.
um, with wanting to understand the impact to the flood zone before and after. Even if the whole site isn't in a 100-year flood zone, they want to make sure that what's being built isn't going to flood the neighbors.
Yeah.
And again, this isn't anything new. This is something that's typical to all developments, but some of the parts of the country are now requiring an additional step, into doing this, full map revision study. And, so these aren't things that people always realize going into the project.
Yeah.
And so we're starting to see a lot more projects like that. And they're not so much insurance related, as lots of these ones we were talking about. Sometimes people just want to be able to get their permits so the construction isn't held up.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And, they want to be able to continue moving forward in the development process. And there are scenarios where the flood zone has halted that or created extra delay.
Mm.
And
So you
delays
guys,
and
in part of that
costs.
white glove service, like, are you helping? Because obviously, new development, people who are doing that type of project know where to go and how to get, the permits based off of their typical development process. But if they get stuck into a flood zone or an area that they're not familiar with, that might be something where they're in uncharted territory. Are you guys still able to work with municipalities, work with the permit offices, and do what needs to be done on that side to help them, get that ball rolling and get everything approved for their plans?
Exactly. Yeah. So
Okay.
we're helping get all the hurdles eliminated that the flood zone's creating. Typically we're not filing the permits ourselves, but we're kind of working alongside, the development team, to make sure that they have all the requirements completed, that the flood zone locally is requiring. So, when you look at the full life cycle, there's so many different scenarios that just pop up. And, for us to be able to kind of hop in and understand these unique scenarios that people are facing, a lot of times we're just, advising, and then we figure out if there's more, to be done, and just doing a lot of educating like this,
Yeah.
because you've never built in a flood zone or you've never bought something in a flood zone. Like all these different situations might be entirely, being seen for the first time.
Do you feel like, and it's not just coastal regions, but of course that's the first thing that comes in my head. But there seem to be a lot of different weather patterns and crazy things going on with, like Texas has record rainfall, things like that. So, do you see the requirements for current flood plans or new flood zones? Do you see that becoming more of an issue, or not an issue? Do you see that occurring more often now for people than maybe what it has in the past? And so more and more people are faced with having to deal with flood insurance than what they would have had to 10 or 20 years ago. Do you see those zones and things changing? Or is it just the new requirements that lenders are putting on properties with like part of the area being in a flood zone?
Good question. Yeah, pretty common question that pops up actually. So two parts really. So one, the lenders are only following the current flood maps, and the
Mm-hmm.
maps don't update particularly quickly, when you're talking at like the county level. So each county is in charge of updating their flood map. And so if there's a 2022 flood map that's coming in place and you're seeing that you're just getting a record rainstorm, it's going to test what the current drainage and infrastructure capacity is of that area. And if you may have a record water event that maybe exceeds that capacity, and you start to see some flooding as a result. But
Mm.
that doesn't mean that the flood map is going to change like 1 year later. These things take several years, for the new studies, and then there's a whole process that they go through. So yeah, you might see, more flooding in some areas than you did before. And a lot of that, especially in Texas, is just because there's so much more density and water has to go somewhere.
Yeah.
So those construction situations and those impact studies I was talking about, that's a lot of why those requirements have now become standard in certain parts of the country, is they're trying to make sure they're covering all their bases, to say, all right, if you're going to build 400 homes or you're going to build a 300 unit apartment site, how is this going to impact all the surrounding areas, from a flood perspective?
Yeah, even though they might not be in the flood zone, they're going to be adjacent to it. And so, like you said,
Mhm.
that impact, they're going to have that requirement on there. Yeah, I think that'd be a big deal because I mean, if you're looking at a property and you look at the map or you look at, whatever zoning surveys you have, it may not show a flood zone, but then you get into it and your lender may have a requirement just because it's next to one. So,
Well, the one thing to clarify there, so the lenders, they don't really have a subjectivity to it. So if you look at a flood
not the
map,
lender's fault. Yeah.
if a 100-year flood zone touches any corner of a building, right, it doesn't even have to cover the whole thing,
Yeah.
even just kind of like rubs up against the edge of it, um, then that's when their compliance requirement kicks in. So the process they go through is the lenders have a third party service that checks the flood zone determination for every building. And a lot of that's an automated system. And so it checks to see if the 100-year flood zone is touching any buildings, and four walls and a roof is what you'd consider a building. So like
Okay.
a carport, doesn't count. If any of the buildings are touched by the 100-year, they're automatically given that flood insurance requirement. And then the type of loan dictates the limits that they have to put in place.
Okay. That makes
Um,
sense.
so very rarely, unless someone's getting like a private lending type scenario, do they have kind of some subjective decision making around what's required. Because most people are typically having some type of federally backed loan that they're using,
Yeah.
especially with larger real estate.
Yeah. Especially if they are doing a refi, the idea is you're going with a larger agency, long-term debt, so they're going to have those requirements.
But a lot of people think that they're like, oh my gosh, the lender, they're going to require this, they're going to require that. And I'm like, well, in reality, they're just trying to make sure that their compliance is, been satiated so that they don't get fined from those that are auditing them.
Right. Yeah, lenders don't do that for fun, believe it or not. They they could care less about that. So they're doing it based, like you said, they're doing it based off of their compliance. No, but that is helpful. So on the new development side, um, if you are, if you have already sent your plans for approval, that's okay. You can still work with it and make sure that, decide whether or not it makes sense to continue looking at that process. But if you haven't sent your plans for approval, you guys definitely need to be talking and, figuring out what you guys can do and prevent the flood zones from inhibiting permits and keep that ball rolling. So, okay, so on the new development side, that makes sense as well. So, if we obviously you guys cover a lot of territory, you cover a variety of asset classes throughout all different stages. So, who do you think of all of the ones that we've talked about? Is there a particular market? Is there a particular asset class? Or is there a particular phase in the process, whether it be new development, acquisition, or refi? Which one do you think you serve the most? Like, who is your most likely to be successful in going through this process? Ideal avatar.
Yeah, I mean, really any type of property that's got multiple buildings, all in the same. So, and you can really say any kind of, like a multifamily, a self-storage, um, adult living, although you tend to see those, not as many garden style buildings, but um, largely because when you have more buildings on one property, then the percentage chance of helping, goes up. Um, there's different solutions that you tend to see more common to certain asset classes. But really, like multifamily is by far our biggest asset class that we do the most projects. Um, Condos and are all over the place in Florida. So, for a lot of our Florida clients, we do see a lot of condo projects down here. But there's really no one particular part of the country that we find more than another. Um, they're very case by case.
Yeah.
And I wish that we had a heat map that said this is the magic spot, because guys in acquisitions ask us that all the time. They're like, "Oh my gosh, this is great! I can go add $1 million in value to my deal. Where are the secret, nuggets out there?" I was like, well, if I knew exactly where all those were, I'd try to go buy them myself.
Yeah, like I'm not gonna tell you, man. Oh yeah, you've got it's like we always made the joke that brokers, multifamily, all the commercial brokers, like if they see a really good deal, they've already bought it for themselves kind of thing. So, or at least the big ones have. So you guys are on the front end of that too. Or at least if you could figure out that heat map, you would be. So
Mhm.
maybe that's our 2025 project, DJ. We need to start a side gig and figure
There
out
you
some
go.
way to engineer that. I don't know. I'll just be your supporter. I don't know how to do all the software stuff on the background. That's not my strength. So,
That's okay.
oh my gosh. So yeah, like you said, your ideal avatar, there's not necessarily a particular market, but if you do have a property or multiple properties that have multiple buildings on them, then there's a higher chance, a higher likelihood that you guys will be able to step in and add value. You are based in Florida, but your engineering team is licensed and available nationwide. What does the process look like? So obviously there's a review, but even prior to that, is that a scheduling like a 20-30 minute phone call, or what does that look like as far as if somebody's hearing this and they're thinking, "Oh my gosh, I got to call DJ." What does that process look like as far as what they can expect moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's always great to have a brief discovery conversation just to kind of understand the situation that someone's in. That helps us really have a good framing for, how we can best help and what problems we're really trying to solve. The property review is just a few documents, right? The insurance documents for flood, some elevation certificate or topography, any kind of survey. Um, and then in reality, it takes a few days to do the review, and then we come back, have a conversation for what any next steps could be. There's always a chance there might be additional data that's required of the property. If that's the case, we'll paint the picture and say, hey, this is the solution we think is possible. Here's the likelihood. Here's what the cost would be to get our, internal team on site the property. Does it make sense to keep going at that point? That
Perfect.
way they're making, if they're going to spend any money on survey, um, we want them to have some intention behind it and understand, the likelihood as best we can predict. Um, Alternatively, we might have enough data to move forward with the solution right away. And the next
Okay.
conversation we're having is, all right, you told me this was the problem you're hoping to solve. Here's the solution we have to solve that problem. We would discuss the proposal and the contract, terms and costs, et cetera, and then we move forward. And so all of our contracts have 100% guarantee, that the solution will be successful, or else we don't actually charge them for that part of the project.
Okay, so that actually was running in the back of my mind. So if somebody gets to that point where you're having the next steps conversation and you're providing the solution to whatever problem they have, and you're laying out, all right, here's our proposal, here's the terms and in the contract overall, here's what it would cost. So if somebody gets to that point and they're determining, does it make sense to move forward? They're able to go forward with confidence that the solution you guys are providing is going to be
Mhm.
it's 100% guarantee.
Yeah, so if FEMA doesn't change the map, or if the insurance carrier doesn't change the policy, we're not charging them for anything there. The only upfront cost they have, the only sunk cost, if you will, is if there's ever, some data at the site that we need to collect. And I know that up front. So we can't guarantee that the survey is going to be successful, but we'll tell you if we think it's a 20% chance or if we think it's an 80%, that XYZ solution would be possible. They make the decision to continue down the investigatory portion of the process. But once the data and our solution is definitive, then yeah, we're standing by our confidence and executing that solution.
That's amazing. I mean, yeah, if you're going through that whole process and you're able to feel, I mean, that confident in it, I mean, you don't hear that word guarantee very often. That's so far and few between. So people who are able to, be confident enough in what they do, that's great. And like you said, surveys and all that, everything outside, there's cost there, but you don't have control over that. So, awesome. So obviously, like you said, you're getting into on your personal investment side, dealing with properties that you invested in 21, 22. Um, Looking forward, and it can be either on your own personal investments or on your business side. What what has changed? Obviously, there's been a lot going on, and maybe some things have developed in your business. Like I said, you can talk about business or personal side. What do you think has changed, and what are the lessons that you've learned over the last few years that you're looking forward to adjusting or making changes to in the future?
Yeah, I mean, on the business side, we continue to just find new situations that we can help with, right? There
Mhm.
hasn't been a dramatic shift as a result of, the 21, 22, when all the rates started to increase. If anything else, what we do became more valuable because cost savings became, worth their weight in gold. Um, on the personal side, it's been tricky because, like, obviously capital calls became a thing for a lot of investors. You start seeing the ugly side of,
Mhm.
the glamorous world of real estate investing. And so you just have to be flexible, right? And understand that they're not all going to be grand slams. Fortunately, everything is still afloat that we, put capital into, but there's a few where the boat is a little bit rocky. So we're trying to stay optimistic, but being realistic too that we might lose some.
Yeah.
And at this point, we're hoping to have any kind of a net gain to any small degree. Maybe one does well, another doesn't, and we kind of live and learn and then move on for the next. Um, we've talked about, my wife moved into franchising,
Yeah.
so we've kind of diversified a little bit to take a little more control over, some of the capital we're placing. So she's opening dry bar franchises in Sarasota, and then, we'll be moving that up into, the St. Pete Clearwater area within a few years as well.
Nice.
So
Have y'all haven't opened that second location yet, right? I know we were talking about that a little while back.
yeah, so we acquired one that was existing. We're looking at a site for a second one, this year. And we'll pretty much be doing like one a year for the next few years.
Nice.
Um, so that's, something that allows us to have a little bit of, active, we weren't ready to take down an active real estate project at this time. So we've got our passive investments on the real estate side. We've got our active business that Jillian is overseeing. Um, and then I'll be here at NFE kind of for the time being for a while. And so um, yeah, I mean, just trying to get a lot of different logs in the fire and have hopefully some good outcomes overall.
Yeah, hopefully some of the I'm in the same boat, right? Like I'm looking at some of these properties, I'm like, well, that's probably not going to go well. Maybe it'll be offset by others, but our expectations have adjusted quite a bit. So we're just going to muscle through the next few years.
I mean, there's definitely things that are learned that will change, you know, where and how, I place capital the next time around
Oh,
in the
absolutely.
market room, right?
Yeah.
So,
And the good
well,
operators are even I mean, I'm invested with a couple of fantastic operators that have been around for decades and they're doing a great job now. The properties are still muscling, right? We're not achieving what we thought, but even good operators are um struggling. I don't like that word, but I guess that's all I can think of off the top of my head. So, with all that being said, I think the time that we're in right now is going to separate, I don't want to say good eggs from bad eggs, but there's going to be a separation between people who understand asset management and manage the property well and operate very well and people who are just, trying to burn and turn properties just to make a profit. There's a really big difference and I think that's starting to come to light a little bit, unfortunately, but the silver lining is on the other side of this, we'll know who the good operators are.
yeah, I mean, we've seen it just in the conferences that we've been at, right?
Yeah.
Somewhere suddenly you see half the amount of people, and the people that were a little bit, maybe squeamish, that's the right word,
Yeah.
aren't showing their face. And
There's some people in hiding right now for sure.
but I mean, I can only sit and watch it like a sport. I can't control the day to day of those properties. That's what you give up, obviously, being a passive investor. But
Right.
um, I can just advise, and I've reached out to my GP counterparts, with relationships that I have, right? I'm adjacent, so I have lots of insurance contacts or,
Yeah.
lending contacts or brokers, right? So anything I can do to just, using my network to make introductions to help impact my own investments is what I've tried to do. I can't control much beyond that point, but that's what I've tried to at least contribute. This, at least I know I tried something.
Yeah, that's huge. I didn't even think about that. As a passive investor, you do have some value add there to help, minimize the bleeding as much as possible. So that's huge. Well, then if I guess if you and Jillian ever decide, obviously if she's got her dry bar going on in Florida, if you ever come to DFW, man, we like our big hair. The bigger the hair, what is it? The higher the hair, the closer to God.
There
So
are there are a lot of dry bars in Dallas, though.
yeah, I haven't been over
Um,
there. I mean, obviously I do so much with my hair. So
well,
uh
the operator that owns that territory, she's got like 7 locations, I
oh
think.
wow.
We've met her. She's really nice, and they have a really successful venture there. So I'm sure there's not one too far from you.
I bet you're right. I probably need to do a little bit of digging, but you know, neither here nor there. Um, so anything that you are um excited about on the horizon. Again, it can be on your personal investments or on your business side. Anything you're really looking forward to that's coming up.
I mean, I think just continuing to try to be as like resilient as we can with, kind of the situation that we're in with the market. Obviously, you hustle hard on the sales side so that way you can then go and put that money, to work somewhere else. So there's always motivation in that regard. Um, so I think 2025 is just kind of looking forward to watching, Jillian really grow and her business ventures and then just kind of support from the side. Um, and then just rinse and repeat.
Yeah. I'm excited for her too. I know you guys are she's gonna kill it. Y'all are gonna kill it. Okay, so we started with a little bit of your background, went into business. So we're going to complete the DJ sandwich and come back to your personal side. If you were to kind of pause and look at, the grand scheme of things, what is something that you want to do more of, but you haven't really allocated as much time for as you'd like to?
I mean, I think Jillian and I would always like to travel more. We
Yeah.
enjoy getting out of the country. We've spent time in Europe. We spent time in South America. Um,
Where's your favorite place that you've traveled?
I mean, I've lived a lot of places. It's hard to say. Like, I love Chile. I lived there after college. I lived in Spain in college.
Ah,
Um, so I always enjoy, getting back to those places.
yeah.
Um, we spent some time in France, which was really cool. So
Ooh,
I don't know. There's so many places to see and just not have time to see them. So
I know.
that's
I,
uh that's what retirement looks like, I think, is we would definitely spend large chunks of the year in other places.
going all over. My husband and I are the same way. I think once we are to the point where we've got that 100% passive income, we're gonna lease our house, pack up our stuff, and fill up a backpack and go. I'm looking forward to it. I love it.
That's right.
So we've actually kind of talked quite a bit about this so far. The last 5 years, last 3 years have been rough, but over the last 5 years, what new belief, behavior, or habit have you adopted that has most positively impacted your life? Anything that you felt has been just a game changer for you?
I mean, I think health is always something you can be more conscious of, right? So being, you know, diet conscious, exercise focused, it's something that I think gives me a lot of routine just having played sports my whole life, so, trying to have certain routines in those areas more from like a longevity standpoint.
Yeah.
I turned 40 in November, so it's like you have to be forward thinking with that kind of stuff. Um, there's just there's more counter, you know, impacts. I don't know the right way to say that, but there's just things that work against you. I've noticed, now getting a little bit older,
If
even though
that
I'm
ain't the truth,
super
oh my
active,
gosh.
but yeah, I mean, I think that's something that I find myself reading more about and watching
Yeah.
more videos and
We don't
yeah,
bounce back like we did in our 20s or our teenage years. Oh my gosh. I used to run my body into the ground and eat and drink like crap. And now I'm like, I can't even finish. If I want a Dr. Pepper, I can't even drink half of it. I'm like, oh, my tummy. Like,
yeah, no, all those things have more consequences at this age. So,
absolutely. Well, I'll spill some of your personal info that DJ got preferred plus on his health rating. I'm so sorry. My dog just like barreled in here. He's new. We adopted him and he's still learning his manners, so he's fine. But you got preferred plus on your health rating. So whatever you're doing is working.
no, that's good. Yeah, we didn't know how that was going to turn out, so that was kind of cool.
Yeah, you did great. So no, that's good. So let's wrap up. You know me, I am an avid reader, listener, all of those things. So I always like to hear from others what they're reading and doing. What are your favorite books and or podcasts? I know, like you mentioned, you're doing a lot on the health side. So anything that you want to recommend to others?
That's a good question. I mean, I'm not as much of a reader as I should be, despite having a library backdrop on my Zoom. I just now was thinking with the irony of that.
That is a good idea.
Um, but I mean, I think there's like a book I read recently called Buy Back Your Time that I thought was
Hmm.
really impactful. It really changed the way I kind of thought about, the calendar and the week. So I'm trying to work on implementing some of those principles. I really like the book Extreme Ownership.
Oh yeah.
I've listened to that book several times, and if someone's heard of it, maybe they've read it, but they haven't listened to it because the actual authors, read the book. I think it has a
Hmm.
little bit different effect. Um,
I was looking for it. I thought I had it on my bookshelf, but I think it's I have a couple bookshelves. I think it's on my other one, but yeah.
and then there's another book called The Compound Effect.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm just a big, big believer in that concept. Obviously, you see that every day because the infinite banking side, but it's like you don't see results from one workout or one good meal. It's a month, 6 months, 12 months. And the way the book talks about it is like it's flat, 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 and then you see the big exponential jump. And most people don't make it to the point where the curve actually goes
One of
up.
my favorite analogies that I got from that, and it for whatever reason really resonated with me. It talks about when you're boiling water, you have a pot of water on the stove. I think it was the compound effect. You have a pot of water on the stove and you've got the heat all the way up and it's sitting there and it's sitting there and it keeps heating and it keeps heating, but you don't see anything. The water stays level. And you think nothing's happening until you finally see that first bubble. And
Yeah,
then what happens once you see that first bubble? First bubble and then the second, and then boom, it's just boiling out of control. And the same thing happens, like you said, it's not one workout, it's not $1 saved, it's not, one day scheduled or time, 1 hour managed. When you do that stuff consistently, it eventually turns into this massive compound effect. That reaches farther than we could have ever imagined. So I think about that boiling water. Just it seems like it takes forever, but once it gets there, it is like boom, man. It's like you said, it's exponential. So love that, absolutely. So, is there anyone or anything that you are looking to get connected with right now? Anybody in particular, or anything that you're looking for in your personal life or business that if you're out there, here's your sign.
I mean, I'm always looking to meet other folks in the real estate world. Not even just flood zone related. Um, naturally, that's like what I do in the daytime, but we're always looking to build new networks and meet new folks around the country. So, always happy to talk real estate with anybody. Um, and I think it just kind of grows, from there. I'm a big sports guy, so I play a ton of golf. So I tend to always connect with people that, are doing those kinds of things too.
Do you do like real golf or do you do top golf?
Oh no, real golf for
Real golf
sure.
that you do the real sports. I do the ones that are not really sports. They're more for camaraderie than anything.
True. Those are fun too, though.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. All right. Well, I know we are just over an hour. So, DJ, thank you so much for your time. And going into that, I've known you for years, and I know we've talked about a couple of different things, but there's even things in here that I didn't realize. So, I know this is going to be so valuable to others that are listening. So, what is the best way to get in contact with you? I'll make sure and include this at the bottom of the screen.
Yeah, my email is great. I'm super responsive there. Just my first name, DJ at nationalfloodexperts.com.
Perfect. So we'll
And
have DJ's email. I'll also make sure that you guys can connect with him. He's very active, pretty available on LinkedIn as well. So I'll make sure that as we're sending this out, we'll tag you in as many platforms as we can, make it as easy for people to find you as possible. In the meantime, you guys, like I said, make sure that you are reaching out to DJ, whether you're doing new development, acquisition, or refi. The sooner the better. Get the flood insurance or the flood zone addressed as soon as possible. Other than that, again, DJ, thank you so much for being on. Everybody, make sure that you like this, share this with somebody. The more information we spread, and like DJ said, when we're connecting our network to each other, that's how we continue to grow. That's how we continue to build businesses. So that's what this is about, is connecting everybody else to our network, and helping everybody else grow and build their business. So until next time, we'll see you on our next Member of the Month.